Welcome back as we continue to follow the developments at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. And we're standing by, hopefully we will get next the Grenadian Prime Minister, Dickon Mitchell. The schedule has been adjusted in some ways because we did have Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister Gaston Brown appearing far earlier than had been on the schedule that we had. Today we've heard from the Barbados Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, and also from the St. Lucia Prime Minister. We'll share that with you a little later on. But also coming up is Haiti and also Bahamas. We'll do a little juggling, we hope, to be able to share with you exactly what's happening there. But as expected, the Barbados Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, delivered a tour de force again at the UN General Assembly today, calling for a lot of reform and resolution and urgency as far as the many elements of the world community are concerned, and really invoking a number of voices, in other words, being the voice really for the voiceless, so to speak. So the Irish presentation has just ended. I think this is where we should go to the stage and pick up what's happening next.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Dickon Mitchell, Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure and Physical Development, Public Utilities, Civil Aviation and Transportation, and Minister for National Security, Home Affairs, Public Administration, Information and Disaster Management of Grenada. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Dickon Mitchell, Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure and Physical Development, Public Utilities, Civil Aviation and Transportation, and Minister for National Security, Home Affairs, Public Administration, Information and Disaster Management of Grenada. I invite him to address the Assembly.
His Excellency Dennis Francis, President of this 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General, heads of state and government, heads of delegations, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, please accept my warmest greetings and congratulations on your election to the presidency of this 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I take this opportunity to commit my delegation's fullest support and cooperation with you and your office as you work towards fulfillment of the 4 priority areas that you have identified. The same being peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability, all of which I also view as important areas in this challenging and dynamic global agenda. I also commend and thank your predecessor, Mr. President, His Excellency Tabasa Kurosi of Hungary, for his leadership and guidance of the last session of the General Assembly. Mr. President, it is my privilege once again to speak from this center podium where 1 year ago, I addressed the Assembly Hall for the very first time as Prime Minister. It was exactly 15 months ago when the people of Grenada, Caricom, and Petit Martinique, exercising their democratic right through free and fair elections, voted my government into office on a transformation agenda that promised to bring about fundamental change that would have a discernible and positive effect on the daily lives of all our citizens. So here we are, Mr. President, exactly 1 year ago, removed from my own inaugural address to this Assembly, and against the backdrop of this year's 70th session's theme of rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainable for all. But what does this all mean, Mr. President? Excellencies, friends, when we continue to live in a global environment and context where citizens are still plagued with issues such as hunger, poverty, gender-based violence, climate-related disasters, and other such issues that affect our planet, but especially those that touch and concern such aspirations as achieving all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. Against this backdrop, Mr. President, I'm pleased to take this opportunity to announce that Grenada will soon be celebrating its 50th anniversary of national independence on the 7th of February, 2024. In this regard, it could not be a more fitting occasion for my government and citizens to not only celebrate the upcoming Jubilee's milestone, but also to take the occasion to reflect and look ahead with respect to Grenada's continued role in the United Nations, where we must have a reimagined and renewed commitment to upholding the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. The post-COVID pandemic world. Further to Mr. Speaker, and looking ahead, Mr. President, and looking ahead, particularly in a post-pandemic world, we can report that Grenada, like many others, was not spared the devastating and blunt post-trauma effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, coming to our shores and which took a deadly toll through the loss of many lives of our citizens in our Spice Island. Still, and notwithstanding the many traumatic experiences of that period, Mr. President, a period which saw the tragic loss of lives, lockdowns, mandates, and ultimately some relief through vaccine development, relief and its administration, the resilience of the Grenadian people rang true, and we ultimately prevailed as a people against an invisible enemy who during its reign took the lives of those whom we knew and called family and friends and loved ones. But we as a people survived. In that regard, Mr. President, and as the world and international community continue on its way to recovery and rebuilding, and as Grenada reflects on this particular experience, it would be remiss of me if I did not emphasize and remind us all of how important it is to have international cooperation with each other, along with the sharing of resources, information, and having continued dialogue through such multilateral forum as we find ourselves gathered here today. To that end, Mr. President, it cannot be overstated how much these last 3 years have allowed us to hopefully learn from the tragedy and adversity as seen during the crisis of the pandemic. We all must never forget that whenever and wherever there are severe challenges and especially human suffering, the United Nations and its members must come together and respond to such crisis with the greatest urgency through its multilateral efforts and cooperation, so that we can all come together in the aid of our neighbors and citizens in the time of their need. In that regard, Mr. President, and as Grenada looks towards its future and casts its eyes upon our own embrace and pursuit, with hopes of achieving all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, I'm indeed pleased to highlight and speak briefly on SDG 4, quality education. On this front, Mr. President, Grenada, under my government's leadership, has made significant advancements in improving access to quality education for all of its citizens of Grenada. Further to Mr. President, and to ensure that no one is left behind, our premier community college for youth exiting the secondary school system in Grenada, the TMRHO Community College has implemented skills to access the Green Economy Project in partnership with a significant member of this body to allow many of our youth to receive the acquired job-related education and training in a variety of identified vocational disciplines. Additionally, Mr. President, my government has developed and commenced a free tuition policy, which allows all students access to a post-secondary school and tertiary level education at no tuition cost to them as part of our commitment to a good quality education to as many a cross-section of our student population and wider population as possible. SDG 5, gender equality. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Grenada can also speak to its engagement and implementation work with respect to SDG 5 and the very important issue of gender equality. In this regard, my government continues to make numerous advancements towards achieving gender equality, including, but not limited to having gender themes reflected in several policy frameworks, including our medium-term action plan. We have implemented the Spotlight Initiative, which aims to end violence against women and girls, and which highlights the all-of-society approach required to advance the attainment of this very important SDG 5. This initiative has come with the assistance from the United Nations Development Programme, whom we thank, and which is designed to focus attention, coordinate human effort, and strategically apply resources to the implementation of a well-conceived, comprehensive national program to contribute to ending family violence and all forms of violence against women and girls in Grenada, Caricom, and Petit Martinique. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. With respect to SDG 8, Mr. President, as it pertains to decent work and economic growth for our citizens, and given what we have seen and experienced during the pandemic, and now a post-pandemic world, where there were disruptions to supply chains, economic inflation, and recession in many parts, we do acknowledge and recognize that our unemployment rates remain a challenge, and there remains much work to be done. However, and notwithstanding, Mr. President, Grenada has sought to mitigate against these harsh realities and push back against these shocks with several projects being implemented, including our land bank project, the Grenada Climate Resilient Water Sector project, and the UNDP Climate Resilience Agricultural Program. These initiatives and projects, Mr. President, have served as critical activity areas that have created many forms of employment for our citizens, especially our young people, giving them a renewed sense of hope that they too can have equal access to employment and economic opportunities. SDG 14, life below water. Mr. President, as another example, the 14th SDG goal, life below water. Grenada understands all too well how important our oceans are to countries like Grenada, who are big ocean states, where many of our citizens rely on the ocean, especially the fishing community. They heavily depend on the ocean for their daily sustenance and livelihoods. As such, my government has embarked on the Fiscal Resilience and Blue Growth Development Policy Credit Project, which aims at giving support to Grenada's transition to a blue economy. Additionally, Mr. President, Grenada has embarked on the creation of additional marine protected areas, legislative and policy frameworks, including the Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan. These are all geared towards protecting the integrity and lending support to marine areas management on our island. SDG 15, Life on Land. Mr. President, with only 35% forest to total land ratio, Grenada has made advancements in the measures that we have taken to protect our forests. Our forest policy provides the overarching framework to ensure the resilience and sustainability of this finite and precious green resource through a number of strategic directions. Which leads me, Mr. President, to perhaps the equally important SDG number 17, Partnership for the Goals. In this regard, Mr. President, I'm pleased to state that multi-stakeholder partnership has proved invaluable and have paved the way for SDG advancement in Grenada, as stakeholders recognize the need for an all-of-government and all-of-society approach to advancing and attaining Grenada's progress towards sustainable development. Finally, Mr. President, allow me to further address the one subject that is perhaps arguable the single most encompassing and prevailing issue of our time. And it relates to SDG 13, climate action. Mr. President, every year, we, the leaders of these 193 member states of this august institution, gather here in New York to give a status update as to the progress that we have made in our respective countries and the future that we would like to see, as viewed through our own lenses coming from the various regions of our international community. In that context, Mr. President, if there is one thing that we can all be certain of, it is the likely occurrence of a climate disaster of some kind among one or several of our member states, and which will have devastating impacts on our citizens, our economies, and inevitably affect the state and progress of that country's development. Mr. President, last year I called for the escalation of the urgent action that is required by our community of nations to give specific focus to redoubling our efforts on climate action. In this regard, at this year's Climate Ambition Summit, the summit was an opportunity for government leaders and other partners to present credible and concrete actions to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal of the Paris Agreement alive and deliver climate justice to those on the front lines of the climate crisis. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change confirmed that global emissions are at their highest levels in human history and only continues to rise. Such increases, Mr. President, will only continue to wreak havoc on communities, economies, businesses, and create a severe strain on public finances. Mr. President, the states that contribute least to the climate crisis are the ones bearing the heaviest burden. And without immediate and deep emissions cuts across the board, I'm afraid that we are on a trajectory for far worse outcomes if we don't take significant action today. Mr. President, as we look forward to the upcoming COP28, my own region and colleague Caricom heads of government have emphasized the critical importance of urgent efforts to address financing to address the impact of climate change. These heads of governments also agreed on the need for strong political advocacy from the region on key action areas to keep the 1.5 temperature goal within reach, focusing on areas of finance for adaptation and loss and damage, improving access to finance for SIDS, de-risking, debt sustainability, and innovation as key points. Grenada shares these concerns on these important issues and continues to be and remain vulnerable to the harsh climate crisis and its devastating effects. Grenada has implemented several policy frameworks, such as the National Climate Change Policy and the National Adaptation Plan, which are geared towards assisting in advancing the country's strategic approach to climate adaptation and building resilience. Adaptation efforts will be scaled up through initiatives such as the Climate Smart Agriculture Program and our second nationally determined contribution, which has set an emission reduction target of 40% below 2010 levels. Against this background, and further to our own efforts in Grenada, Mr. President, last year at this time, I said this, and I quote, "I call on all young people to take action. It is not yet too late to do what is necessary to safeguard our planet for future generations. But the time for action is now. We cannot continue to give lip service to climate change when climate change is showing us every day what it is capable of doing. The reality is, the leaders of today will not be around to feel the consequences of their decisions. It is therefore up to our youth to lead the charge for the future they want to see. This remains true today as it was last year and will remain true for many years to come. Today, Mr. President, I make the further clarion call for all member states through their leaders and high-level representatives to take decisive action and do what is necessary to safeguard our planet for future generations. But the time for such action is now, Mr. President. Now is the time for global country leaders to follow through on those commitments made at the multilateral level. Our goal as responsible citizens should be to leave this planet in as good a condition, if not much better, than we actually found it. Finally, Mr. President, on issues concerning those of us in the global south of the Caribbean archipelago. Mr. President, being conscious of your first priority pillar, that of peace, we renew our call that the Caribbean region continues to remain a zone of peace and an environment that contributes to social, economic, and environmental development of all Caribbean states and the world at large. In this regard, and in light of the just concluded successful G77 and China summit in Havana, Cuba, Grenada reiterates its call for the removal of the US-imposed economic, commercial, and financial blockade against Cuba, and a further call for Cuba to be removed from the US State Department's list of countries that are co-sponsors of terrorism, and that it be allowed to rejoin and be renamed among the peaceful, loving nations of the international community. Still in our Caribbean community, Mr. President, Grenada remains deeply concerned and must also raise awareness over the deteriorating situation in the rule of law in Haiti and the very troubling escalation of violence in our fellow Caricom member state. The urgent support of the international community needs to be ramped up, in particular in the humanitarian and security areas where the needs are greatest. The need for robust security assistance to counter the rampaging armed gangs is clear. Yet the decision to enable this is meandering slowly through the Security Council. Caricom welcomes the government of Kenya's willingness to lead such a multinational force and the offers of support from Rwanda, the Bahamas, and Jamaica to contribute personnel. The Caribbean community hopes that the establishment of a multinational force will receive endorsement by the United Nations Security Council as a demonstration of the commitment of the international community to support the restoration of law and order and to improve the humanitarian conditions of the people of Haiti. Inter-Haitian dialogue is also key to any progress in addressing the multifaceted crisis. Caricom, for its part, is providing its good offices through an eminent persons group consisting of 3 former prime ministers of the region to facilitate these efforts. A resolution of the political crisis in Haiti is also key to free and fair elections to place the country back on a constitutional path and to open the door to an improved future for its citizens. The people of Haiti deserves no less. In that regard, Mr. President, Grenada calls on all friends of Haiti and the good offices of the Secretary General to continue to support the people of Haiti. With respect to the Republic of Venezuela, Mr. President, we further reiterate and also remain resolute in our call for an end to the imposition of unilateral coercive measures against Venezuela, contrary to the rules and principles of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. In conclusion, Mr. President, with a challenging, complex, yet dynamic global agenda, it is still incumbent upon us as global leaders to still look to a world with a renewed sense of hope and sincere optimism. It is with that renewed sense of hope that we must continue to press forward and aim to achieve not just the 17 SDGs of this multilateral forum, but we must seek to dramatically affect the greater good, the human lives that we have been entrusted to lead. It is a position that I do not take for granted, Mr. President, but envision, along with my government, that the pursuit of those goals pursuant to the 2030 Agenda can be met and will be met. With steadfast commitment and a shared vision and cooperation from all of us, so that we can indeed achieve, Mr. President, peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all our citizens and all peace-loving nations represented and assembled in this great assembly hall. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure and Physical Development, Public Utilities, Civil Aviation and Transportation, and Minister for National Security, Home Affairs, Public Administration, Information and Disaster Management of Grenada for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Kauseu Natana.
Okay, so that is where we're gonna leave that coverage, because we'd like to pay attention to the developments represented by another Caribbean leader, and in fact that will come from none other than the Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry, and after him will be the Foreign Minister Fred Mitchell. I think that we can say safely that the Grenadian Prime Minister delivered a report card, particularly as far as the performance of the Sustainable Development Goals are concerned. What we're going to do here, though, is give you an opportunity to hear the address from none other than the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, who appeared earlier today and delivered his particular contribution to that debate. So we've got a little time on our hands, so I think we can do that safely now.
The Assembly will now hear an address by His Excellency Philippe Joseph Pierre, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development and Youth Economy of St. Lucia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Philippe Joseph Pierre, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development and Youth Economy of St. Lucia. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, distinguished heads of state and government, other distinguished heads of delegations and delegates, let me join in the congratulations to you, Mr. President, on your election as President of this august body. This is the first time that a national of your country, Trinidad and Tobago, has assumed this office, and only the fourth occasion that a representative of a Caribbean community state has been so elected. Let me, therefore, not only wish you success as you preside over our deliberations, but also, Mr. President, let me assure you of the fullest levels of respectful cooperation from St. Lucia as we work together to advance the collective interests of our common civilization. Mr. President, there are many amongst us, the small and marginalized islands of our globe, surrounded by rising seas and scorched by rising temperatures, who are beginning to question this annual parade of flowery speeches and public pretense of brotherhood, otherwise known as the UN Annual General Assembly. What is the point, we are beginning to ask, of meeting here every year when every time the international community is called upon to take the agreed collective actions on the critical issues affecting the poor and the powerless, there is always some hesitation, some delay, once we vacate this historic building. And so, with just 7 years left to the target year of 2030, we are gathered at this 78th session of the General Assembly to discuss accelerating action towards the 2030 agenda because its Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, are in peril. We have been summoned here to rebuild trust and to reignite global solidarity for the 2023 agenda, when trust and hope are the devalued currency of global dialogue. Despite our greatest efforts to maintain faith and belief in the principles of global engagement, our entire post-independence experience has been one of dashed expectations and institutional frustration. In the 1990s, we watched helplessly as powerful countries utilized the World Trade Organization to dismantle St. Lucia's marketing arrangements for bananas in Europe, forcing hundreds of our farmers into poverty, while these already rich countries provided huge subsidies to their own farmers. When some of our Caribbean countries successfully developed our financial services industries, we were blacklisted and graylisted like lepers and global undesirables. However, the Russia-Ukraine war has now clearly revealed to us which metropolitan capitals are the real tax havens and which are the true pipelines of illicit money. And now today, our citizenship by investment programs, which we have successfully pursued for decades, are being undermined, while the Golden Passport and Golden Visa programs of some OECD countries remain unquestioned, untouched, and unmolested. We nonetheless remain committed to keeping our programs transparent, even whilst we strengthen our due diligence regime. Mr. President, St. Lucia has come to this 70th session to say there must be justice in the relations between developed and developing countries, and that we are no longer willing to come to this annual parade merely to lend our voice to support of this or that global conflict, or to condemn whoever from year to year is the new global enemy. No powerful nation's global agenda is more important than our own, and we insist that our legitimate concerns be listened and be acted upon. Mr. President, the people of the Caribbean and St. Lucia have been designated by the African Union as part of its 6th region which comprises people of African origin residing outside the continent. We feel ourselves obliged to seek justice for reparations for the crimes against humanity that tore our ancestors from our African homeland and enslaved them in the lands of the Western Hemisphere. It is laudable that for the last decade and a half, the United Nations has been observing the 23rd August as the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the slave trade. The UN is also to be commended for proclaiming International Decade for Peace for People of African Descent, which ends in 2024, and we look forward to the proclamation of a second decade. However, the time has now come for the issue of reparations for the transatlantic slave trade and slavery in the Western Hemisphere to become a more central part of the global agenda and work of the United Nations, and not an issue only to be whispered about in the corridors and at the margins. It was the 400 years of the enslavement of Africans and colonialism that has led to the need today for action to achieve the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. The Secretary General of the United Nations made this unambiguously clear in his message this year to mark the International Day of Remembrance of Slavery and the Slave Trade. He said, "We can draw a straight line from the centuries of colonial exploitation to the social and economic inequalities today." Reparations for slavery, Mr. President, therefore mean that the countries which benefited and developed from 400 years of free labor from enslaved humans should now pay back for that free labor. We urge that the UN embraces this principle as a central part of its work in the coming years, with set goals, timelines, and programs of action. In the same way, Mr. President, we cannot speak of accelerated action for the Sustainable Development Goals for developing countries when developed countries do not treat the climate challenges facing developing countries with the urgency and importance they deserve. These challenges not only negatively impact our economic growth, but they threaten our very existence. Yet, developed countries behave as though they are blameless and not responsible to repair and compensate for the damage they have inflicted on our planet. Have they not understood that climate change is a danger not only to the existence of small island states, but to the survival of all countries today and not tomorrow? In just about 2 months, we shall be traveling yet again to another conference on climate change, COP28 in Dubai. We will be doing so with the current extreme and extraordinary weather events graphically demonstrating the gravity of the climate crisis. On behalf of the people and government of St. Lucia, I extend sincere sympathies to the people and governments of the Kingdom of Morocco, Libya, and the other countries that have recently suffered the obvious ravages of climate change. The new manifestations of the crisis are signaling to us that the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius to stay alive is now very much at risk. It is said that the Roman Emperor Nero fiddled while Rome burnt. We cannot continue to be like Nero-like, talking away while the planet is literally burning and sometimes drowning. If COP28 is to be transformational and not another disappointing Nero-like conference, then it must deliver an ambitious global climate action plan to 2030 if it is to answer to the necessity for climate justice for developing countries like St. Lucia. Having said this, Mr. President, I wish to reiterate, however, that what is critically needed is a complete reform of the global financial system to make development financing truly developmental and climate financing truly just. As has been said so many times before, and in so many different fora, and by so many small island developing states, The negotiations and the agreements for developmental assistance for these states must take into account their peculiar vulnerabilities. Consequently, one area where accelerated action is certainly necessary is that of the adaptation of Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, MVI, for small island developing states, in order to replace the gross national income per capita as a primary measure for concessionary financing. Another measure that should be considered is the Recovery Duration Adjuster, RDA, as proposed by the Caribbean Development Bank, which measures the internal resilience capacity of a country after a shock or natural disaster. It is past time for the multilateral development banks and international financial institutions to introduce these reforms. But global financial reform has to be comprehensive and radical, as put forward in two recent proposals, which I commend to this august body and to international financial institutions. The first is the Bridgetown Initiative, presented last year by my Caricom colleague, Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados, which argues for resilient finance mechanisms that will address both the climate and developmental crisis facing developing countries. The second is the UN Secretary General's SDG stimulus to deliver Agenda 2030, tabled in February this year. Both plans are an appeal for immediate action, and they provide a practical pathway to sustainable development and climate justice. There is therefore no deficit of ideas for reform of the international financial architecture. There is simply a dearth of goodwill. Mr. President, in the declaration issued in 2015 on the adoption of a 2030 agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals, it was said that there can be no sustainable development without peace and no peace without sustainable development. Today, 15 years later, we are in a world without peace, and the Sustainable Development Goals are in jeopardy. How can trust and global solidarity for sustainable development be rebuilt when the unwarranted Russian war in Ukraine rages on, with its collateral economic damage to other countries the world over, of biting inflation, particularly on high food prices, high oil prices, and shortage of food? If trust and global solidarity for sustainable development are to be rebuilt, the unjust, unilateral, and inhumane economic embargo against the people of Cuba must be immediately withdrawn. The unmerited and cruel sanctions against the government and people of Venezuela should cease. The Palestinian people should have their own state alongside Israel, in accordance with relevant United Nations resolutions. The people of the Republic of China on Taiwan should be allowed the continued enjoyment of their right to self-determination and the exercise of their democratic freedoms without threats to their autonomy and with a place in international fora. There must be an end to the conflicts in Africa and a halt to all forms, whether old or new, of neo-colonial exploitation of the continent's resources, so that the African people can fully benefit from the riches of their lands and from the greater unity among African nations. In our Caribbean region, the member states of the Caricom community, Caricom, remain gravely concerned over the deteriorating political, social, humanitarian, and security crisis in Haiti, their sister member states. Haiti needs the urgent and dependable support of the international community. The response to date has been underwhelming. UN efforts of a few months ago to raise $780 million for humanitarian purposes have received low pledges. The need for robust security assistance to counter the murderous armed gangs is clear. Yet the decision to enable this is meandering slowly through the Security Council. The Caribbean community hopes that the establishment of the multinational force will be given full endorsement by the United Nations Security Council as a demonstration of the commitment of the international community to support the restoration of law and order and improve the humanitarian conditions of the people of Haiti. Caricom welcomes the government of Kenya's willingness to lead such a multinational force. Member states of the Caribbean community will contribute personnel as well. The community will also continue its good efforts through its eminent persons group to assist the Haitian stakeholders find a solution to the political crisis, a critical necessity to pave the way towards an improved future for the people of Haiti. I urge the various Haitian stakeholders to cooperate with Caricom to find a political compromise for the sake of the Haitian people and in honor of the heroic and fabled ancestors whom they revere so much for daring to break the chains of slavery 200 years ago and bring freedom to the black people of the Caribbean. Mr. President, the immorality of the suffering, the destruction and death that these conflicts are bringing to the world are not the only reasons for our appeals to end them. The immorality is only matched by the absurdity of the expenditure on arms that sustain these wars and inhibit peace. This should be of grave concern to all of us. What is of equal concern to states like St. Lucia is the illicit trade in small arms and light weapons, which ran into billions of dollars in 2022. Not only do these arms and light weapons fuel lesser conflicts all over the world, but illegal arms facilitate criminal activities in St. Lucia and other Caricom member states. Illegal firearms were responsible for 70% of the homicides in the Caribbean community in 2022. And in St. Lucia, the majority of homicides are firearms related and involve young people both as victims and yet, Mr. President, neither St. Lucia nor its fellow Caricom member states manufacture small arms, light weapons, and ammunition. Their sources are our continental neighbors to the north and south of the Caribbean. St. Lucia therefore continues to strongly support the international instruments aimed at preventing and curbing the illicit trafficking in small arms and light weapons. Mr. President, I welcome the announcement by the United States administration earlier this year to provide technical assistance to support and to combat illegal weapons smuggling into the Caribbean and in solving gun-related cases. Let us be reminded that SDG 16.4 aims at significantly reducing illicit arms flows. There is, however, hope for global solidarity. In June this year, the Intergovernmental Conference on Marine Biodiversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction adopted the historic Marine Diversity Treaty. For St. Lucia, a small island development state, the protection of the oceans is an imperative since the oceans and their resources do not belong to one country but are the heritage of all mankind. St. Lucia signed the treaty this week and we will move towards its ratification in the shortest possible time. Mr. President, I offer my congratulations on the opening of the UN Youth Office. As I said in my address last year, the importance accorded to the youth by the UN is in harmony with my government's policy of giving priority to youth affairs for the creation of a youth economy, in which young people with state assistance can turn their talents, skills, and hobbies into businesses that will provide sustainable self-employment. I'm therefore pleased to report that our youth economy was formally launched in March this year and has been met with enthusiasm and success. To date, about 300 young people in St. Lucia have benefited from funding and training from the government to assist them with starting or supporting their businesses, and the numbers continue to grow. Once again, I invite the international community to engage with us on mutually beneficial relationships and projects to promote the youth economy. Through the youth economy, we are responding to the SDGs, and with my government's policy of putting people first, we are addressing the other SDGs. Mr. President, After the destruction and ruin of the 20th century world wars and the Cold War, one would have thought that the start of the 21st century would have ushered in a new era of global solidarity. It has not. In conclusion, I ask these questions, for which we must all provide urgent responses, as the fate of Agenda 2030 depends on our answers. Is there the political will and commitment to divert financial resources away from destructive activities like wars and other conflicts? Is there the political will to place these financial resources instead into the productive action of responding to the climate crisis? Is there the political will to use these trillions of dollars to end starvation and underdevelopment in the world and provide justice for reparations? Is there the political will to put people first and not weapons first? Is there the political will to develop trust and build a lasting peace that will rekindle our sustainable development goals and lead towards prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all? For the sake of us all and for future generations, we must find it. Mr. President, to quote St. Lucian-born Nobel laureate, Honorable Derek Walcott, hope is not a thing to be deferred, but a thing to be pursued with all hungry passion of our existence. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance
and come up so that you get to see me. All right, so there we are then. We got the Prime Minister of St. Lucia on just in time. And what we're going to do now is monitor the stage, because what should happen next is a presentation by the Prime Minister of Haiti. And that, of course, is one of the pivotal speeches we expect to hear today. And so let me see if I can get rid of this sound behind me. My own monitor. All right. So get rid of that. But simple production here. All right. So we had St. Lucia's Prime Minister really delivering quite clearly there the very latest update as far as his country is concerned, the issues that he considers very, very important, and really providing another report card. I was struck by the fact that both himself and the Prime Minister of Grenada taking the opportunity of literally walking through some of the tenets of the Sustainable Development Goals and providing the kind of update as to exactly what's happening in their own country, but also, of course, ranging over the issues on the global agenda, which certainly have occupied the attention of many of the presenters at the UNGA podium. Certainly common points of support for actions to be lifted, sanctions to be lifted against Venezuela, for instance, and also the removal of that embargo against Cuba. Many of the leaders who presented were in Havana, Cuba, for the G77 plus China meeting, and therefore came away with a particular impression as to the need for, or the impact I should say, the impact of the developments there. All right, let's then move then to hear the introduction of the Prime Minister of Haiti as he prepares to come on stage here at the General Assembly presentation.
Haiti in the Security Council and its robust support to the National Police of Haiti. President, I commend the choice of theme to guide our statements during this session, namely rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, accelerating action on the 2030 Agenda and its sustainable development goals towards peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability for all. We must therefore consider and propose solutions to the main global challenges in order to move us towards peace, security, and sustainable development. Indeed, it's difficult to think or imagine sustainable development without peace and security. We need solidarity and determination in order to overcome these challenges. The world, ahead of the 2030 deadline, is in a poor state. The outbreak of several conflicts with disastrous consequences for civilian populations, the multiplication of security, health, and food crises remind us that we are moving further away from the lofty ideals of the UN Charter. By way of example, food insecurity caused by conflict and violence. The Global Report 2023 on food crises states that 258 million people were in a situation of acute food insecurity and needed emergency food assistance in 2022. That is why my country took part in the high-level open debate on conflict-induced global food insecurity, which was organized in August by the Security Council in order to sound the alarm. The global economy, since the COVID-19 crisis, has been stagnant. Inflation is striking several economies, and the prospects of growth are not encouraging. President, this situation indeed has consequences on less developed countries, especially Haiti, which is always facing price volatility and a serious crisis exacerbated by the deterioration of the security situation of the country. I should also note, against this alarming backdrop, the issue of climate change, which, for small island states like Haiti, is a constant danger. It seriously tests us. With every hurricane, economies in the Caribbean region suffer huge losses. And this challenges the significant progress that has been made in socio-economic and political terms due to the destruction of economic, educational, health, and energy infrastructure. As the head of the government of Haiti, this is an opportunity for me to set out the situation in my country, which has been in the middle of a crisis for years, and we need to find tangible, lasting solutions to this. This is a structural, multidimensional crisis which has impacted institutions and is hindering economic development and social progress. It has now reached a critical point. With the deterioration of the security situation, on a daily basis, people are facing violent attacks by armed gangs, which control various areas in the capital and some provincial towns. They assassinate, they set fires, they pillage, steal, and abuse with particular cruelty. They drive citizens from their homes, they block roads, and they force schools and hospitals, as well as businesses, to close their doors. The deterioration of the security situation in recent weeks has led to a new humanitarian crisis, with displaced persons spontaneously occupying various sites to escape gang violence. More than 25 schools in the capital are used by internally displaced persons, to an estimated sum of over 16,500 people. They face serious difficulties and they are experiencing subhuman conditions. The health threat is also present, with cases of cholera being detected in certain areas. This increases the risk of transmission and is a real public health issue for the population. Abuses, systematic human rights violations caused by gang violence compromises peace, stability, and the security of the country and the region as a whole. Kidnappings, pillaging, fires, the recent massacres, sexual and sexist violence, organ trafficking, human trafficking, homicides, extrajudicial executions, the recruitment of child soldiers, the blocking of main roads. This is but a non-exhaustive list of crimes perpetrated by armed gangs. As a result, there are serious consequences, such as poor economic performance. We have seen 5 years of contraction with a negative growth rate and increased inflation of over 50%. Moreover, the humanitarian crisis is exacerbated. According to estimates, 4.9 million people in my country face food insecurity. This is about half of the population living below the poverty line on less than $2 per day. President, we are not here to make up for or justify the past. We are here to ask our friendly countries to understand that there is something urgent to be done to benefit the people of Haiti and to help us to create a better future for the children of Haiti by re-establishing security and stability. The Republic of Haiti has seen many successive shocks over the last 15 years, 3 major earthquakes, several cyclones, and the awful assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021. It's impossible today to invent a peaceful story about Haiti. The reality is there, and it calls on us all. Many poor decisions and inappropriate behavior, as well as various instances of radicalization, has brought us to this stage. Today, once again, at this rostrum, I am asking for help to allow Haitians to stay in their homes. We are seeking tranquility that their homeland can remain that. In particular, given economic crises and the climate crisis. I reiterate, on behalf of the people of Haiti and the government, the request to help bolster the National Police of Haiti so that it can truly respond to the challenges it faces in its mission to protect the lives of those in the country. Some countries have seen similar situations as Haiti faces right now. Criminals feel that they are all powerful, and this is unacceptable. They must not evade the law, and the will of our citizens exists to once again have freedom of movement. Haitians today very much hope that they can return home. We are very grateful to countries who have helped us. However, I'd like to also say that it's also very important to engage in reconstruction.
No.
President, I have come here today on behalf of the people of Haiti to tell you that we are ready for that change which we have been waiting for almost 2 centuries now. Freedom can only be complete if it enables each citizen to live in dignity and decent conditions. I have come here today on behalf of my people to raise our security question, which remains the key priority of my government, to highlight that the circulation of arms, massacres, kidnappings are major concerns for my administration. President, the daily lives of the people of Haiti is very difficult. That is why the Security Council, which has the power and the necessary authority under Chapter 7 of the Charter, must take urgent action by authorizing the deployment of a multinational support mission to underpin security in Haiti, consisting of both police and military personnel to support Haiti's national police force to combat the gangs and restore peace and order. The use of force as an initial step remains essential to create an environment in which the state can function properly again. It is a necessary initial stage, but it is not enough in and of itself. Social and economic development must also be addressed in order to find a sustainable solution to the extreme poverty, which is the origin of all of the ills facing my country. Social inequalities and the very unequal distribution of wealth in Haiti has caused a huge gap to exist between the poor masses and a small minority which possesses and controls 90% of the country's riches. The extreme poverty in my country accentuates unemployment amongst the youth, marginalizes poor communities who are then easily tempted into a life of crime. That category is fertile ground for recruitment by gangs. Once again, from this rostrum, I send out a call to all Haitians of good faith, those living in the diaspora and those still within our borders, to all actors in political life, whatever their persuasion, to work hand in hand with the government to combat the gangs, restore security, and as true democrats, to seek power via the ballot box. My interim government is determined to hold elections as soon as practically possible. In the days to come, despite the situation in the country, I will finalize an agreement with the High Authority for the Transition, setting down the steps necessary for an electoral consensus with the support of the international community. The government intends to continue dialoguing with all political actors and civil society stakeholders in Haiti in order together to find a patriotic historical consensus necessary to find a way out of this crisis. Democracy is at peril. Our country needs a return to normalcy in order thereafter to be able to address the major challenges it faces. I also wish to see women and young people play a major role in civil society, as well as all other actors, in order to get our country back up on its feet. Only a legitimate government, elected in free, honest, democratic, and transparent elections, will have the strength to tackle the economic, territorial, social, and institutional challenges we face. President, I wish to bring to the attention of the international community a situation which has been emerging in recent weeks on the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, causing unnecessary problems between the two republics which share the island. I wish to state that the Republic of Haiti is not at war with anyone. Haitians are a generous people who have always shown solidarity and who believe in dialogue and the ability to fairly share shared resources in full mutual respect.
Je suis venu vous dire
I came here today to let you know that we have no intention of any form to prejudge the neighbours with whom we share our island and with whom we must coexist and advance. History teaches us day in, day out, that violence with a brotherly country can only lead to regrets and leave behind bitterness and remorse handed down from generation to generation. I have come here today to say, and above all, to pass on the message of the entire Haitian people. The river known as the Rivière Massacre a background of friction between Haiti and the Dominican Republic means that we must do our very best to ensure that old demons do not break free again, that we do not open old wounds or cause new ones. Haiti reaffirms the sovereign rights of the Haitian people to use binational water resources, just like the Dominican Republic does. And we call for an equitable sharing of the river's resources. The Haitian people chooses the path of dialogue and negotiation to peacefully resolve any differences, any conflicts under the auspices of international agreements signed in good faith between the two states in 1929 and again in 2021. President, before concluding, I take this opportunity to send my best wishes to the brotherly and friendly countries, as well as international organizations, for their commitment and expressions of solidarity towards Haiti. In particular, I highlight Kenya, who has taken on the leadership of the security force and has already, in August last, conducted an evaluation mission in our country. We wish to also express our thanks to Caricom and a number of eminent individuals. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, over the course of history, Haiti has been an emblematic example of freedom and solidarity. We have always been there to help brotherly countries in their legitimate struggle for freedom and self-determination, including here within the United Nations. The Republic of Haiti identifies with the universal principles for which it fought in the 18th and 19th centuries. Despite the many sufferances and distress of my country, we remain hopeful. The Haitian people continues its quest for a better future of dignity. The people of Haiti, just like it showed the world in 1804, changing radically its status from slave to freeman, can once again and wishes once again to rewrite its future. I call for support, fraternal solidarity, so that we may turn the page on this dark time in our history. I call on the international community to take action quickly. We hope to long live good relations with our brotherly people in Africa, with our international partners. Long live Haiti.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister of Culture and Communication of the Republic of Haiti for the statement just made, and I request protocol to quote His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Siaosi Ofakifa Folau Sovalene, Prime Minister and Minister for Education and Training, Minister for Police, Fire Services and Emergency Services.
We've got another change again, as at this point where the coverage, of course, in the schedule is changed one more time. So let's take that down and turn our attention, of course, to the developments which should interest us. But quite a presentation coming from the Haitian Prime Minister, and well, he's heard a lot from many people over the course of the days, and having an opportunity to accept the support which has come from many quarters, and I hope that we'll hear. Well, we expect we'll hear far more of that as we continue. You know, some of you missed the Barbados Prime Minister presentation earlier, so what we're going to do right now is bring that to you as well, as so that you get a chance to catch up, so to speak. So here goes.
I have great pleasure in welcoming Her Excellency Mia Amor-Motley, Prime Minister, Minister for National Security and the Public Service, and Minister for Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados. I invite her to address the Assembly.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I'd like at the outset to congratulate my dear brother from Trinidad and Tobago for his assumption of the office of the presidency of this General Assembly. I'd also like at the outset to thank the Honorable Secretary General for his continued determination and holding us and the rest of the world to the principles that are sacred to this august institution. The truth is that the speech which he delivered at the beginning of this General Assembly can be adopted wholesale by the government and people of Barbados, because it reflects our aspirations and it reflects our view of the current status of the world. I asked myself on Monday night, as we met to determine the halfway point of the SDG goals, how many roads we have to walk just to make it to the door, only to be told that the door is closed. Those are not my words. Those are the words of Rocky Dawuni, a famous reggae artist from Ghana, nominated by M4 for awards multiple times. But his words ring because, in a very real sense, are we going to trod the roads only to be told that it's too late? Too late for us to save as many as we can from the climate crisis. Too late for us to save as many as we can from the conflicts of war. Too late for us to be able to provide the food that so many need, as we reflect on the fact that more people are likely to be hungry in this world in 2030 than in 2015, or as we get to the basic numbers that 735 million people suffered chronic hunger last year, at a time when so many others had so much to throw away and to use. Are we going to be too late for the SDGs that are really the promise of development and the promise of the conferral of dignity on our people? We have today to determine what is the will of this body comprised of the member states to make the fundamental governance changes that will deliver in the third decade of the 21st century. Our world, as you know, is replete with issues. And I don't need to stand here and recount them in detail, for you have heard them in almost every speech delivered from this podium. But what is the issue is whether we can summon the determination that is required of us to make the changes that are appropriate to the age in which we live. Our democracy cannot survive if we do not have the same facts. But yet we live in a world where the generation of fake news is almost a daily occurrence, and where people act on those premises without consideration for whether the news is true or not. The role that artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, will play in our world must be for good purposes and not evil. But if we are to ensure that is the case, then an appropriate framework for regulatory action must be put in place. We therefore support the actions of the Secretary General, recognizing that the question will come one day from some as to whether you sought to preserve our democracy or whether you allowed it to crumble, and whether you have failed us as individual citizens of the world. We ask that question, recognizing that AI is not in the immediate focal point of many, because the drama and the crises that surround climate is taking out all of the oxygen, literally, in the world. Those people who died in Libya recently were going about their business. They had aspirations. They had business that they were hoping to do, families that they were trying to protect. And in the flash of an eye, all of that came to an end. And not because we didn't expect it or anticipate it. The records of the multinational companies who are engaged in fossil fuels will show that they have always known for a considerable period of time the consequences of their actions. And while they themselves are not the immediate cause, the absence of technology to be able to limit what they are emitting is the cause. And by extension, therefore, they must take responsibility. We can go no further without an engagement of the oil and gas companies that is meaningful and credible. And we need to stop talking about it and just simply ensure that that kind of conversation can happen. But it is not just the oil and gas companies, and we have nothing against them. We do not want to bankrupt them. But their actions continue to have implications for too many of our people. Their actions are equally bolstered by what I call the fit group, the financial institutions, the insurance companies, and the transport companies. They get a buy or a pass because they are invisible to the transactions and to the activity that lead to the problems that the world is facing. But they too are as responsible and need to step up to the plate. The notion that we can preserve global public goods only with public money ignores the fact that we have seen for the last 50 years the absolute dominance of the capitalist markets leading to a consolidation of wealth, and hence the ability to be able to play their role must be summoned by the rest of us. We cannot continue to put the interests of a few before the lives of many. I ask us today truly to pause, because what keeps ringing in my head is that simple phrase, don't fail us now. Don't fail us now. And that phrase can come from that little boy or girl who is a victim of hunger, one of the 575 million people last year. That plea can equally come from those who lost families in the multiple crises across the world in the last few years. That plea can come from small states that may not exist in the future. I ask us, therefore, my friends, to ensure that we summon the will. We listened to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands just now, and he reminded us ably that time is not on our side. And if time is not on our side, what must we do? The truth is, we have made some progress. 2 years ago, the International Monetary Fund did not have a mechanism to focus on cause of the problems that led to massive macroeconomic instability. We now have the establishment of the Resilience and Sustainability Trust that for the first time will make funds available to middle-income countries that are vulnerable. 20-year money with a 10.5-year moratorium. A year ago, the president of the World Bank was questioning whether there was a climate crisis. Today, we have a World Bank that for the first time acknowledges that there should be debt clauses that are suspended, debt pause clauses as they call it. Our battle now is to ensure that those debt pause clauses are not just for future instruments, but for existing instruments. If not, it will not help many. So we have made progress, but there is still much to be done. The issues of debt sustainability cannot be left on the sidelines, particularly with the number of countries, more than 60 countries facing debt row today as we speak because of the polycrises. Countries being forced to choose between development and building of resilience to fight climate. In our small island states, we value education and healthcare and the dignity of life, and therefore it will be anathema for us to tell our citizens that we do not have the space to provide for you those things that were the promise of independence. It is compounded by the failure of the developed world to accept that reparatory justice is a solemn obligation which we must confront. The conversation King Charles told us at the opening of the Commonwealth Heads of Government when he was Prince Charles was a conversation whose time had come, that of reparatory justice. But it can't be a slow conversation taken up when people feel like. It has to be a conversation in which equal partners discuss. It cannot be an act of charity of those who simply feel that their conscience must be cleansed. We were about to write the leaders of the European Union last year on this issue of reparatory justice, and we paused because of the Russian incursion into Ukraine. But it seems as though there are not those who want to make peace there or elsewhere in the world, and therefore we have to lift our finger off the pause button and resume the discussions, because the development deficit caused by centuries of exploitation is now affecting our capacity to build the resilience that is necessary in our nations. Similarly, I want to thank, because a year ago we did not have the Paris Agenda for People and Planet. We had the Bridgetown Initiative, and the Bridgetown Initiative has allowed us to keep the debate going, because we need to change, as I said Monday morning in this hall, the belief that we can have short-term money financing development and building resilience. I shan't go into all of the details because we don't have the time, but suffice it to say that we are committed to the twin battle of saving people and planet, and to ask us to do anything else is a false construct that does not work. The markets have to be educated as to why long-term capital is the only salvation for developing countries and ultimately for people and planet. And my friends, year after year we talk about the need for global moral strategic leadership. I shan't go into all of the details, but in my own region, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Pacific, there are too many examples where we fall short. And I speak specifically now first and foremost about Haiti. The world owes Haiti a resolution. It is not a matter of options. The world owes Haiti a resolution. A year ago, we knew that the gas riots had led to serious instability, and 12 months later, we cannot get out of this building and into the support that the people of Haiti need. There is no doubt a need for legitimacy with respect to the government of Haiti, and therefore a national unity government may well be the only bridge that can carry us to safety. The Caribbean community has appointed 3 former prime ministers as an eminent persons group. And as we heard the Secretary General say in this hall, politics is the art of compromise. Diplomacy is the art of compromise. I say simply to those who act in the name of the people of Haiti, there must be compromise in constituting that government of national unity if we are to provide the bridge, to provide the security, to stop women from being raped, stop people from being killed, stop people from being affected by cholera and other public health diseases. But even when we put in the institutional support that Haiti may need, and I want to thank the governments of Kenya and Rwanda, who from as far back as 12 months ago committed to being able to provide the kind of institutional support and leadership that the Haitian police need. But as they did that commitment, what they have not necessarily accounted for is the continued reduction in the numbers of the police, largely because of persons fleeing to lands of greater opportunity and being facilitated in so doing. This cannot wait much longer. And I hope that those who constitute the members of the Security Council will recognize that they cannot use Haiti as a pawn because they have suffered for too long and by the hands of too many. I return now to the issue of Cuba. That Cuba can help so many in this world and yet be the continued victim of a blockade of over 60 years, but worse than that, a designation as a state sponsor of terrorism is wrong, wrong, wrong. We left Cuba last week. And what the people of Cuba are being asked to face on a daily basis because of a designation by a dying presidency is wrong. And the voices of the global community, many of whom have been the beneficiaries of Cuban assistance, need to stand united and to be able to say that we cannot fight these battles when we need all hands on deck to save the planet. The artificial division of who is right and who is wrong and who is good and who is bad in the eyes of those who are powerful cannot continue to be the way in which this world functions. And let us go to Venezuela. Oil is likely, oil prices, to go over $100. And those small countries who do not produce oil will be the victims of it, as will be our people, including in large countries like the United States of America. We must bring resolution to these issues. And it is not incapable of resolution. When the United States of America and many countries in Europe determined that they were recognizing President Guaido without there being a presidency for him to assume because he faced no election, the members of the Caribbean community came to this august institution and met with the Secretary General and met with a number of countries. And little by little we saw people apply their hearts to wisdom and to recognize that the Charter of the United Nations did not allow for that kind of unconstitutional conferral of presidency on anyone. I say today that there must be transparency. It cannot be that the Caribbean community that needs a mechanism for stabilization in an energy crisis cannot have access to the concessionary prices that the government and people of Venezuela are prepared to make available to its neighbors to minimize the suffering. How is it possible for Chevron and the European Union to access the oil and gas of Venezuela, but the people of the Caribbean cannot access it at the 35% discount offered by the people of Venezuela? How is it possible that we should have to carry a cost of an additional 4% of GDP in my own country simply because the rules that allow for one do not allow for the other. There must be transparency and there must be moral strategic leadership if we are to build the team to save the planet and to save and attain the SDGs in today's world. My friends, there are many other things that we can discuss. We support the United Nations accepting the responsibility for tax. Why? Because as quickly as the world has been able to find a mechanism for a global minimum corporate tax is as long as it has not found a mechanism to be able to inflate the financing opportunities available to developing countries. It cannot be. We know how to run fast in one set of circumstances when it suits one set of people, but yet we run very slow when it matters to billions of people and their access to life and livelihood. I do not want to prey on your time anymore, but suffice it to say that we have reached a point where we must give thanks for the progress made, but recommit ourselves. For the mission was never simply to make progress. The mission is to be able to save the planet and to give the people of the world the best opportunity for life that is necessary for them as human beings. To be able to save the biodiversity of this world. To be able to save the soils of this world that must nurture the food that we eat. To be able to allow us to have access to safe water. And if we don't change how we do our business, if we don't recognize that the Security Council needs to put itself in a position not to speak to climate change, but to protect us against the climate crisis, because it is as much of a crisis as the war in Ukraine or the wars in Africa or the instability and conflict elsewhere in the world. And if we don't take a proactive approach, then we truly shall be victims of it. I believe that reform is critical at this point. But what I believe doesn't matter. What matters is the action of each and every country in this. And will we always be in a position of flux? No. There is hope because human beings want to survive. But the problem is that those whose actions we most need may be so confident in their survival that they do not act early enough for us. And that is why I say, will we trod the road to be able to get to the gates only to find that we are too late and the gates have closed? It will be open for some, but it will be closed for many. You know, vision without action, Nelson Mandela told us, is just a dream. An action without vision just passes the time. But vision with action can change the world. Our citizens believe that we come into a talk shop when we come here. You and I know that it's potentially different. But it will only be different when those of you who have the responsibility to act on behalf of governments can ask your governments to come to the point of the decisions that we need to make to provide the funding, the tools, and the solidarity, rebuilding the trust that this debate calls for. And if we can do that, then we will not save all, but we can save the majority of people who are currently on the front line. We, for those of us who work on the SDGs, believe that as we work to save the planet, we have to redouble our efforts. And I leave you with one thing. The efforts to provide education and to save people from hunger and to remove gender discrimination are not simply the actions of governments. They have now equally to be the actions of individual citizens. But governments must help personalize those SDG goals for their citizens. If we can do that and we can continue to make the case for finance and if we can continue to stay focused on the climate crisis, then yes, we shall see a better world and we can shine the light on the future of many. I thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Minister for National Security and the Public Service, and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort Her Excellency.
So there we are then with the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, catching up in the presentations today. I have to tell you that things have worked out a little easier because at one stage we expected to see and hear from the Foreign Minister of the Bahamas. He was down in that schedule, but he certainly has not come up as yet. So we will see exactly what's happening there. Maybe he will get rescheduled later on, or maybe tomorrow. But we certainly have a number of other Caribbean and Caricom speakers who are due to appear at the podium of the UN General Assembly. Besides Bahamas, of course, who we expect at some point, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Kitts and Nevis tomorrow morning. In the afternoon is Belize, and then Jamaica is carded for next Tuesday. We've had quite a day, though, in the presentations from the various leaders who come to the stage today, from Antigua and Barbuda, from St. Lucia, from Grenada, and of course, just from Barbados being the first presenter today at the podium. And they've ranged over a number of the issues that are of deep concern to us. It's interesting to hear from the Prime Minister of Haiti, who spent the time really laying out the dire circumstances that his country is facing, and really sharing with us from his perspective the damage that's been done to the country, the gangs and their pillaging, raping, assassinations, and much more dastardly activities that have really crippled activities, not just in the main center of Port-au-Prince, but certainly in outlying territories as well. That country has suffered so much in the last years: hurricanes, floods, and much more, earthquakes in particular back in 2010, considerable damage to its infrastructure, and the worsening situation in terms of poverty in that country, some 90%. And he explained that people are really on the rate of poverty rate there, people living on $2 a day, which really is not easily to be contemplated by any of us at all. But he's taken the stage there to make a renewed call for urgent action by the world community to respond to the situation and to help them restore law and order. He thanked the Kenyan government and the Caricom community as well for its support, but particularly for Kenya for agreeing to provide the international force, or lead the international force required to beef up the police and to use a military operation as well to restore law and order. And he's calling the Security Council to make an urgent decision to arrive at a vote that would allow for the implementation of that international force to be deployed. Kenya has already been there and assessed the situation last month. They've also benefited as well from the work of the Eminent Persons Group, the three former prime ministers, that of Kenny Anthony of St. Lucia, the former prime minister of the Bahamas, Mr. Christie, and of course, the former prime minister of Jamaica, Bruce Golding. They've been to Haiti itself. They've had the first meeting, of course, in Kingston, Jamaica, and they've delivered a report to the CARICOM heads as well. And they're just awaiting now the next stage, and have joined the call, in fact, for the Security Council to act swiftly on this matter. Again, the repeat of the calls for the end of the embargo against Cuba, 60 plus years by the United States, and the damage that that has done. And many of the leaders had the opportunity to see the impact firsthand as they attended the G77 plus China meeting in Havana just last week. The call as well for the end of sanctions against Venezuela by the United States. And that, of course, is given Prime Minister Mia Mottley an interesting nugget, so to speak, to say how come it is good enough for Chevron, which is a big oil and production and retailer there in the United States, to have the facilities taking advantage of Venezuela's resources, but you're preventing Caricom states from taking advantage of the facility under Petrocaribe, which the Venezuelan government provided some 35% discount on oil resources. So you got Cuba, you got Venezuela, you got report card on the performance of countries as far as the SDGs are concerned. Interesting take in the presentation from the Prime Minister of Grenada, Dixon Mitchell, who really identified specific elements of the SDGs that his country had been worked on and had some achievement, but ended it all by saying that there was a lot more work to be done. And he expected that the policies that they were setting in place would redound to the benefit of improving their targeting towards the 2030 goal. But he as well joined in calling for what he described as peace within our region, because that will be critical to helping in the sustainable development of our countries. And he, of course, thanked the Kenyan government for the support in terms of coming forward with a security force to beef up the police services in Haiti, and also to try to put an end to the armed gangs that are marauding across that country. So we've had quite a day, thanks to the leaders making their statements at the podium of the UN General Assembly. So all is left for me to do at this stage is really to clear the deck, so to speak, and tell you and invite you, of course, to join us when we continue our special coverage here on Caribbean Bridges of the UN General Assembly 2023. Thanks to our technical support and, of course, to you who have stayed with us throughout the day.